Alright, hey guys, today we're going to talk about the election of 1932. We're going to start with these essential questions. What was FDR's slogan as he ran for president in 1932? What was FDR's legislative program to pull the U.S. out of this depression? What was it called? And the time period where he urged Congress to deliberate on this plan is called what? Okay, so 3 questions there. All right, so the election of 1932. So Franklin Delano Roosevelt was the governor of New York. He's a Democratic candidate for president in 1932. He had developed polio in 1921, which was a paralyzing disease, and he had to wear leg braces. He could stand as long as he was propped near something or could hold on to like a podium or something, and you would never know that there was anything wrong. But of course, when he tried to walk with the braces, that was sort of obvious that something was going on. Later, when he's president, they'll have speeches where a curtain opens and he's already standing at the podium, so no one could see him walking. Think about why his people sort of concealed this polio diagnosis from the American people. Also think about back then, you did not have social media, not even really TV, so you didn't see actual pictures of your president, and you sure didn't see video of him. So you would know his name, and you would see maybe a picture in the newspaper, but never videos yet. So it was just sort of concealed, and one reason why he didn't want anyone to know in the American public was because he thought it would make him look weak. So he's going to wear these leg braces for as long as I teach about him through World War II. He will have a slogan that's called, "I pledge myself to a new deal for the American people." And this is going to be the name of his legislation, New Deal, to get the people out of this economic depression. Remember, Hoover did basically very little or nothing to get the people out. He believed in rugged individualism, whereas FDR, we call him, is going to push through this New Deal, which is a government set of programs that are going to help these people out. So it says he'd go up against the current Republican President Hoover, and that shouldn't be a no-brainer that, you know, he's going to win after Hoover did so little to help everyone. His wife's name is Eleanor Roosevelt. She is so important in history. She is like the first lady we will have who doesn't act like a first lady. She will have all sorts of policy meetings in the White House when she becomes First Lady. She was not as interested in dinner parties and that sort of thing. She wanted to help create and make within the government. So she would have all sorts of policy meetings and meetings in her office. So she's like the front runner to who will become Hillary Clinton. Only in the fact that Hillary also sort of shifted how First Ladies were viewed by not being involved in the dinner parties and the planning, but instead involved in policy making with the president. So she has a lot of influence, Eleanor does, on the president, helps him politically. She also helps him plan to win this presidency. So she's a huge benefit to him. Honestly, they were more like friends than they were really in love with each other. Their marriage was arranged as children. They are going to be distant cousins, Eleanor and Franklin, and that the Roosevelt family was so wealthy, and they wanted that wealth to stay in their family, so they had distant cousins marrying. So they didn't have a whole lot of choice in their marriage. I have a picture of her that I will show you. Well, first, here's FDR in the wheelchair, and this is from the family's collection of photographs. This is not going to be shown to the public during this time because they didn't want anyone to know, but now we know, of course, he had polio and sitting in a wheelchair with his talking to his granddaughter. Here is Eleanor Roosevelt which will be his wife. I told you they had an arranged marriage. Okay, so it says the biggest difference in strategy is FDR versus Hoover. FDR wants the federal government to get involved and bring the people out of this Great Depression. He's very sympathetic to the people, and he really believed they could not do this, on their own, that they were going to have government intervention and a heavy dose of government intervention. Okay, so he wins the election. I'm going to move this up a minute. He wins the election in November of 32 by 7 million popular votes. Hoover is now a lame duck president. Lame duck means you are president, but you're going out of office. And there's this time period where we know you're leaving office, but you haven't left yet. It hasn't been official. So a lot of times lame duck presidents do very little. They know they're leaving. It's kind of like a person who's about to retire, and they've worked for all these years, and they know they're about to retire, so they just don't work as hard. Same kind of thing here, but the distance was what was the killer. 4 months of waiting around with this depression going on. It's important to me that I point out to you that back then you had the inauguration in March. So it's not like today. So the election's in November, and then they had to wait all the way until almost March for a new president. That's a very, very long time. So you had November, December, January, and February, 4 months you're waiting to get to that March new president. So FDR waits for this inauguration. Bank runs start to pick up. There was rumors that FDR was going to abandon the gold standard because he's a Democrat. Remember, the Republicans from early on in our study, the beginning of the semester, the Republicans pushed the gold standard. So everybody thought he would abandon that. And so people started running on the bank to get any gold or money in general that they had out of the bank. So governors had to declare bank holidays. And basically this is where they put a sign on the door and it said closed for the week, for example, for a bank holiday. And so that way it gave everybody a week to just sort of calm down and, reassess the situation instead of frantically running out to the bank because their neighbor had gone and their mom had gone and whoever, you know what I'm saying, to pull their money out. It's to calm down this hysteria. So in his inauguration speech, FDR will very famously say, "So let me first of all assert my firm belief that the only thing we have to fear is fear itself." So what does he mean by this? What he means is that, this paranoia and this craziness and this fear and running on the bank and all this is causing our problem to be worse. If we can just calm down, think rationally, we can work this problem and fix it. So we need to get rid of the fear and think rationally. So I'm going to move this up here. So the 20th Amendment is going to be passed, which will help everything because it's going to move the presidential inauguration day from March to January 20th. That's how you remember it. 20th Amendment, January 20th, which is what it is today. So look, we had this long window from the November election to the March inauguration, right? Now, it's a shorter window from the November election to the January inauguration. So if you've got a guy going out of office, it doesn't take you as long to get the new guy in. And that was what was going to happen here. We're limiting that lame duck time. All right, then you have the 21st Amendment, which after all our prohibition stuff is going to get rid of that, and alcohol is legal again. And I think of it as you can legally drink at 21, so that's how you remember 21st Amendment. Okay, so then FDR is going to launch his plan, and his legislative plan is called the New Deal. And he launches this part of his slogan, remember, in 1933, creating new legislation or laws for federal agencies and federal agencies to help us out of this Great Depression. Okay. And I'm going to show you a picture of that because I think it's a really cool picture from the New Deal of FDR making decisions here in the White House. There's a picture of FDR. And then this is a mural that the WPA will, that's Works Progress Administration, one of the pieces of the New Deal where he puts men to work. And you see these people are working, but there were also artists, which was good because that helped support art in America as well. Those people who are artists, not just construction workers, for example, and they're drawing pictures of what was happening during that time. Today, these are really national treasures because they mark this historical period. Okay, so his New Deal is going to put a lot of people to work. His cabinet, which you know from civics isn't like, you know, the cabinet that you put clothes in, but cabinet as in the group of people he has chosen to give him advice as president. He, once he's chosen them, these people get the nickname Brain Trust because they're so smart and they're experts in their field, and they will come in bursting with ideas on how to end this depression that really fuels the fire of FDR and gets him excited and energized to make these plans. So the country, basically, FDR announces that the country needed their leader to be willing to experiment and just try something, you know, anything, just try something, whereas Hoover tried almost nothing. So, you know, they were thankful. They thought, well, even if this doesn't work, at least he's trying. So the first 100 days is FDR calls Congress into a session, and is right after his inauguration. And during this session, they pass, and this has never happened since, every single law request he provides to them. It's the most legislation passed by any Congress in American history. And thankfully, they weren't fighting amongst themselves or fighting with the president. They saw that he was trying, and they were willing to go with it. So they went with everything that he wanted, and we call this the first 100 days. So if you think like 30, 60, 90 days, okay, there's like 3 months and a little bit. So during that 3 months and a little bit of time, they passed every single legislation piece that he wanted. On March the 12th, he addresses the nation by radio. And look, I cannot stress this enough. It's so important that he got on the radio and for the first time went into the homes of all these Americans and talked directly to them. 60 million people will listen to his chats, and they're called fireside chats, not because he sat near the fire, but because the families would. After dinner, they would sit by the fire at night. The kids would be playing quietly on the floor, like that happens ever. But anyway, not in my world, but in their world it did. And the parents are sitting there perhaps reading the newspaper, and they would turn on the radio and listen to the president. He explained to the people what he was trying to do. He told them to calm down with the hysteria. He told them their money was safe in the banks. And voila, people listened to him. They trusted him. There were no more bank runs. They felt like he had become their personal president by talking directly to their families. And to this very day, many presidents have done many radio addresses because of FDR. So that becomes very important that he made a personal connection to the people. And I have a picture of his brain trust, which are his cabinet men meeting, okay? And then I have a picture of FDR completing a fireside chat. Notice NBC, CBS, okay? There wasn't many, stations, but he's going to be doing this fireside chat to the American people, all right? Okay, so let's go back to our essential questions, and they were, what was FDR's slogan as he ran for president? And his slogan was, I pledge myself to a New Deal. What was his legislative program to pull us out of the Depression? The legislative program is going to be called the New Deal Program, same answer. And then the other question was, what was that session? I think that's what it was, sorry. The time period where he urged Congress to deliberate is going to be called the first 100 days. Now later we'll have the second 100 days, so just make sure you know this is the first 100 days. I said it's like the first 30, 60, 90, and then some days. First 90-ish days into 100, obviously